Welcome to episode 159 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I am your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio on the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who gets to golf as part of his job, John Scott Sloat.
You middle named me there.
I middle name you every week.
Do you every week?
Yes.
I just don't pay attention.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I am golfing on Thursday.
Yes.
Knock on wood.
Okay. Not obviously here in Winona Lake, Warsaw area.
No, I'll be in Florida.
Okay. Yeah. That's tough that your job sends you to Florida in January.
You know, I do get to decide where I go. And so it is no coincidence that December, January, and February I will be heading far south.
Yes. Well, that makes sense. Makes sense.
I think I'll do in February. I'll do Atlanta, Alabama. You know, some of those areas where we have some alum.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
But right now it's South Florida.
Yeah,
Florida.
Yeah. I used to make fun of. When I was younger, I used to make fun of older people who couldn't hack the winter weather and would flee to Florida from November through March or April. Mm-hmm. And now I think, I was the one who was dumb. They had something figured out there.
Oh, yeah. Great idea. Great idea.
They had something figured out there.
And you teach at 1 o'clock today, right?
I do. We're recording on the same day this episode drops. So we've managed to barely squeeze this into our conflicting schedules.
It drops in what, 80 minutes? This episode's supposed to drop?
Theoretically, yeah.
Well,
this is
knock
wood,
on some wood. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, if you would like to get in touch with the show, you can find us on Twitter at VNSPod. Email the show, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. And for the 159th time, I will ask for a 5-star rating and a review.
Yep.
We did have Lee from Indiana reach out on Twitter correcting my ignorance of LeBron James's scoring total. I made some comment that he would break Kareem's record within the next 2 or 3 years, and
It'll be this year. Barring injury.
Well, he just cracked. I don't know if it'll be this year because he just cracked the 38,000 mark a few days ago.
Okay.
And the record is 38,347, I think. So 347 points. I don't know how many games are left.
Playoffs counting that?
No.
Okay.
Actually, he might get it by the end of the season. I don't know. Anyway, so I guess I was not fully up to date enough for the taste of Lee from Indiana. So
we'll call it a begrudging retraction.
Sure. I mean, he actually stopped by my office, like wanting to hunt me down, which felt a little aggressive.
Wow.
Felt a little aggressive to me, to be honest.
Perhaps a restraining order is in order.
If it happens again, we might be seeking judicial action here. So, all right, John, let's talk a little sports here, which basically at this stage means NFL.
Yeah. And NFL. Yeah, NFL.
I mean, I know that the NBA and the NHL are going on. We pay no attention to the NHL. NBA, we pay a little bit of attention to college basketball, but it still feels early for that. It was a massive weekend of NFL football. Mm-hmm. So what, if any, games did you watch?
I kept tabs on all the games. I watched a little bit of the Giants-Vikings game. That was probably the one I caught the most of. Okay.
A bit of an upset there.
The most predictable upset of the weekend.
Sure. Yes. I feel badly for Vikings fans because the most self-aware of them understand, knew this was going to happen. Mm-hmm. That the Vikings will put together a good regular season, they get in the playoffs, and they just can't be counted on in the playoffs. That's just not something that's just part of their DNA. And so the fact that they lost to the Giants was not surprising at all.
No. Coming out for Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones seems to have cemented himself, at least for another couple seasons, as the
Yeah.
Giants quarterback.
I think that's right.
They should have locked him up last year, but hindsight's 2020.
It's tough with young quarterbacks, in terms of
Oh, yeah.
determining, this is our guy, and we're going to dump serious money on him. Because if you're wrong and you've committed a ton of money to a guy, it's tough to get out of those contracts and figure out a way around it.
Oh, yeah.
The most surprising outcome of the weekend was probably the Jaguars making their historic comeback against the Chargers.
I saw on Twitter following this game that the Chargers went up 27-0.
Yes.
An individual put a $1.4 million bet on the Chargers to win this game. Did you see this?
I did, yes.
He would have earned on that like $70,000.
Well, I think it was less than that, the one I saw.
Was it?
It was like 11.
Like 11.
11,000.
Okay, $11,000. Okay. He lost $1.4 million. Like that's a gut punch.
Yeah.
Like that's a life-altering money.
Yeah. I mean, it's a third – that's what the third biggest comeback in playoff history, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which I was watching that game, and when the Chargers managed to score – or sorry, the Jaguars managed to score right before the half to make it 27-7. Like, okay, I think there's a shot. It's a long shot, but you get on the board, you got some momentum, and then
I believe they got the ball after the half as well.
no, I think the Chargers did, but
Did
they
they?
forced like a 3-and-out. They forced
like
a
a
quick
3-and-out.
stop and then got the ball back
And went and scored.
Yeah. So it's not often that your quarterback throws 4 interceptions in the first half and you win the game.
Yeah, that's we talked about the Vikings being an organization that can't win a playoff game.
The Chargers
are right there with them.
Yes.
It's not surprising to me that the Chargers lost
No.
in dramatic fashion.
No, not at all. Let's see. The one of the better games was the Bengals and Ravens. Did you catch any of that?
Just the highlights.
Okay.
Yeah, big turnover.
Well, that game, I'm hard pressed. I'm sure it's happened, but the kind of sudden momentum change that was is not that sudden momentum changes are uncommon in football, but being as dramatic as that was to go from it's 3rd and goal inside, basically at the 1-yard line, and you're like the Ravens are going to score and go up 7 at this point. And in the blink of an eye, Cincinnati has scored. It's a true 14-point swing. Instead of Baltimore being up 7, they're down 7 now.
Yeah.
Remarkable. But it also shows the danger of reaching the ball out, trying to reach it out over the goal line, unless you're Trevor Lawrence and you're 6'6". Like the Huntley guy that tried to do it, I think is like 6'1", 6'2". Like you just don't quite have the reach that a Trevor Lawrence does.
Oh, yeah.
But it was kind of funny to see the player that ran it back, Sam Hubbard's a former Buckeye, and to see him afterwards they showed him on the sideline with oxygen mask on. Like,
anytime one of those defenders, unless it's a defensive back, get the ball and run the length of the field, they need the oxygen.
Well, I saw some analytics stat that was basically it was a 98-yard touchdown, but he ran 123 yards because like he kind of weaved his way a little bit on the return. So, those defensive linemen don't run 123 yards very often.
No.
And the Bills survived against
that was a surprising
the Dolphins.
game.
That was a surprise. So, those are some of the ones that stood out to me. And Tom Brady is no longer in the playoffs. We can all be rejoicing that.
I did, and he was beat by the Cowboys in dramatic fashion last night, in fact.
Yeah.
The Cowboys as an organization have one more playoff win than Tom Brady.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised by that.
How wide? I mean, it's not like we're talking about the Jaguars, an expansion team
right. Yeah. No,
from the 90s. We're
one of the historic franchises in the NFL. Yeah.
Yes.
Though, did you see Dallas's kicker missed four extra points? The first 4 times he tried an extra point, he missed it.
Yeah.
Like, does he have a job for next weekend?
I think he's a former Jets kicker as well. That might explain something. But
Yeah. So on the NFC side, you've got 49ers and Cowboys, Giants and Eagles. And then on the AFC side, you've got Bills, Bengals. That should be a great game.
that should be fun.
And Chiefs, Jaguars.
Chiefs, Jaguars. Yeah. Who did you pick to win it all? I forget.
Did we do it? Did
I
we
feel
pick
like
on
we
the
did.
pod?
I feel like
I
we
don't
did.
remember picking. So if we did, I don't remember. I think.
I picked the Bengals.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't remember who I picked. So if somebody. Honestly, so if I end up picking somebody different here in a minute, it's not I'm changing my mind.
Okay.
I literally have forgotten.
Okay. Because I was like, who did I pick? And I'm like
But
looking at the teams.
I would go with the Bills.
You'd go with the Bills? Even after a week showing against the Dolphins?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think with the Bengals, it's hard. It's rare that a team makes the Super Bowl and loses and then comes back the next year and wins it. That's exceptionally rare. They're really good, though. I mean,
if Joe Burrow gets to the Super Bowl and loses again, he's the new Jim Kelly.
well,
right?
Well, I think he'd have to get there one more time because Jim Kelly got there 4 times.
Yeah.
So that's, So I like all those. I think that Bills Bengals game will be entertaining. Chiefs Jaguars could be, though. I think the Chiefs will probably handily
steamroll them.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yep. Although I like the Jaguars, they're fun. They're a young team.
Yeah.
Good quarterback, young quarterback.
Yep. Yeah, needs a haircut. I'm not a fan of his
Needs
hair.
a haircut. But if he can not throw 4 interceptions, and
That's generally not a recipe for success.
nope.
And their running back's good. That ETN, he's a pretty dynamic player. But it's just hard to see them beating the Chiefs.
It is hard.
Yeah, just hard to wrap my brain around that. But still a remarkable season after last year's debacle.
Oh yeah,
They were terrible last year. I had the whole Urban Meyer mess, and now in the playoffs.
Oh yeah.
So, I've not paid. I watch a little college basketball around this time of year, but I don't pay careful attention to rankings or anything. I know Ohio State has lost 4 straight games, so there's some panic in Buckeyeville.
And you were in Columbus this weekend, weren't you?
I will. We'll talk about that
a little
bit later.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we will. So, you ready to move on?
Sure.
All right. We are continuing our series on the Trinity. So we've done 2 episodes already. First week we did just kind of a general summary of the doctrine. Then last week we did a discussion of some of the key texts in the New Testament that deal with the Trinity. And now this week we are diving into some texts in the Old Testament dealing with the Trinity. And, I think this is one of those places where obviously the doctrine of the Trinity is not clear in the Old Testament.
It's a bit behind the curtain.
It is. I would still say it's there. So I don't think it's fair to say that it's absent from the Old Testament. It's one of those realities that is only visible, really, in light of the New Testament, in light of later revelation about God.
I think I'm going to butcher this quote, but I think it was B.B. Warfield who said, reading the Old Testament on doctrines like this is like walking into a room with the lights off. You can sort of tell there's furniture there, but you might bump into it here and there. But reading it in light of the New Testament is like clicking on the lights, and being able to see everything in full view.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good analogy from good old Benjamin Breckinridge Warfield.
Yeah, Princeton, right? He was a Princeton.
Yep. Good dude. Has some good stuff. He was especially strong on doctrine of Scripture stuff in particular.
Inspiration.
Yep. Yeah.
He also has a great essay on what it means to be a seminarian, to go to seminary. Have you read that?
Yes.
Or
It's
a
been
theologian.
It's been a while.
But it's not a long essay, but it's a good one.
Yeah.
And what is he? Is he early 19, late 18? Where does he fit?
Late 19th century, bleeding into the early 20th, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So late early 1900s?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So what we're going to do, we're just going to look through some texts in the Old Testament and kind of discuss how they point forward towards the Trinity, the doctrine of the Trinity. Again, I think we have to have the appropriate expectations here of like what we're going to see. It's suggestive. It's hinting. It's not obvious, so to speak. So kind of like watching a Christopher Nolan movie the first time through and then watching it again the second time. Like, oh, that's what that's pointing forward to.
And then watching it again the third and fourth time through. Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
All right. Well, do we want to start in Genesis 1?
Yes.
Is that good? 26 and 27. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that is on the earth." So the big takeaway, let us make man. Like there's a plural there.
The plural references, yeah.
Now, I've heard some people go, oh, this is God speaking to the angels about what we're doing. I can tell by your facial expression that does not hold a lot of water.
Well, no. I mean, I think it's a reasonable interpretive position. Others have tried to argue it's sort of a plural of majesty, where someone speaks in the plural as a sort of enhancement of their status and that sort of thing.
Like they have an entourage
with
them when it's really just them.
Yeah. But I do think at a minimum it's one of those things where it's curious. Like, why do we have this passage right here in the creation account where, it's – and part of what's striking is that the pattern up to this point has been God saying – to whatever he's about to create, let the earth sprout, let there be lights, let the waters swarm, let the earth bring forth living creatures. Here he's addressing himself.
Yeah,
let us make man, and so I think the fact that you've got the plural reference plus, if we continue on to verse 27 there, it says, so God created man in his own image. Now it's singular, right? Not, not in their own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So there's this intriguing dynamic here where there's some sort of plural dynamic within God. And it's reflected in his creation of human beings in a plurality. I think if you didn't have the New Testament, if you just were working with the Old Testament, I can see how you would conclude, oh, this is just God speaking either with the sort of plural of majesty or addressing his his heavenly courts. But the problem with that view is angels were not involved in the creation of man.
Or in any other part of the story.
Yeah.
In creation.
So I think it just kind of breaks down there in terms of this he's addressing the heavenly court or the heavenly hosts. Okay, but they're not involved in the creation of man. So I just think it breaks down there. So to me, even if you didn't have the New Testament, it's one of those texts where you go, I don't know what to do with that. It just kind of is an open mystery of what is that plural reference doing there.
Yeah.
So and it's fascinating too that it's on the first page.
Yep. Opening chapter. Here we are.
Yeah.
Let us make man.
Yeah, we're not even like way on in the Old Testament saying like, oh, hey, there's these plural references here. It's right in the start, you've got this sort of plurality mentioned there.
Well, and earlier in the chapter, let me get to the early verse 2, there's a reference to the Spirit.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters.
Yes.
As well. So, I mean, there's a little bit of a reference
Sure.
to some plurality there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then if you jump over to chapter 3, in the account of God's judgment on Adam and Eve for their disobedience, you have this little gem here, Genesis 3:22. Then the Lord God said, "Behold, the man has become like one of us in knowing good and evil."
Mm-hmm.
One of us. Who's the us?
Yeah. I mean, I imagine to a early Jewish reader that this, well, perhaps the royal thing again,
Yeah.
or perhaps talking to the heavenly courts. But
Yeah.
I don't know that those.
And you can make a
hold the
better
water.
argument there for that, but I still think it doesn't work because if you understand the idea of knowing good and evil, that's not like an awareness of it. It's really determining good and evil for oneself. I don't think that's going to apply to the angels.
No.
So, again, a curious little reference there. And then if you jump later in Genesis 11, with language that I think is intentionally echoing earlier language in Genesis, in the account of the Tower of Babel, when God is announcing what he's going to do there. So we'll start in verse 5 of chapter 11, Genesis 11:5. Verse 6. Let me start in verse 6. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they all have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do, and nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down there and confuse their language, so they may not understand one another's speech." Let us go down there. So again, it's just sort of latent there. Like the text never gives any explanation as to even a rhyme or reason to why do we suddenly have a plural reference and then all these other singular references within God. Well,
and if you're not a careful reader of the Old Testament here, right? If you're not looking at the individual words and how they're working together, you're just blitzing through it. It's something you could miss.
For sure. Let's move on to let's go to the Isaiah text, because here's a passage that, again, I think a lot of Christians are probably familiar with, Isaiah 6, but may have missed this particular feature of Isaiah 6. So this is the account of God commissioning Isaiah to be a prophet.
Yeah, this is a fun one.
And I think a lot of people are familiar with this text, but might miss this detail within it or never thought of it in terms of Trinitarian theology. So why don't we go ahead and read? Let's do 6. Let's just do 6:8. That'll work.
Okay. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Then I said, "Here I am, send me."
Okay. So again, you hear this text talked about oftentimes in context of missions or calls to ministry and that sort of thing. And that's great. But it's easy to blitz past that little "whom shall I send" and "who will go for us." Who's the us?
Yeah.
Again, now it's in the context of a scene in the heavenly throne room. So I think this one is easier to say, well, you could be talking about his heavenly hosts, God's heavenly court, his angelic beings, and kind of going on behalf of God and all of his angelic hosts. Okay, that one's a little bit more plausible here than it is in the Genesis ones. But still curious.
So, Trinitarian question for you.
Yep.
We have these allusions, maybe the best, peeling back the curtain a little bit and seeing that there is a Trinity in the Old Testament. What does the second person of the Trinity do? in the Old Testament? Are they is Jesus appearing places? Is how do you understand some of those things?
Yes. So I think that one potential place where we see specifically the activity of the Son is some of the appearances of the angel of the Lord.
Maybe not all of them?
I want to go case by case.
Okay.
And not just do blanket statements on that. Because I think some places I'm like, no, I think that's really just an angel. Versus, no, I think that's probably an appearance of the pre-incarnate Son. For example, I think when Joshua has his experience with the commander of the Lord's army in Joshua, I think it's in Joshua 5, I think that is an appearance of the pre-incarnate Christ.
And what about that passage makes you go there?
Well, you're talking about the commander of the Lord's army, and so that seems like a sort of a royal position, and so I would see that more likely as being the Son in that context than just simply an angel. Oftentimes in those angel of the Lord passages, you have the dynamic of the angel of the Lord says something, and then in the next two sentences, it's the Lord saying something, or something that's true of the Lord, or like sacrifices being offered to the angel of the Lord. Well, I don't know if that's an angel.
Yeah. I'm looking at the Joshua passage now, and in the Joshua passage, he falls down and worships this commander of the Lord.
Yeah.
And isn't rebuked for saying
exactly.
so.
Unlike in Revelation where John falls down before an angel and the angel's like, stop it. Get up.
Yeah.
So that's often one of the key indicators in those.
But you want to go case by case. So,
I do. I don't want to make blanket statements.
Some people want to go, that's every appearance of
Yep.
Of the commander of the Lord is that.
Of the angel of the Lord.
Angel of the Lord, excuse me.
And I want to say, no, let's go case by case.
Okay.
So
what about one more case?
Yeah.
Abraham has the three visitors come to him.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see? Is that a reference to the Trinity and the fact that there's three of them?
Well, if I were a church father, I'd say yes. But I'm not a church father. I am inclined to say no.
Okay.
That's not.
Are you committed to one of them being a member of the Trinity?
Maybe. I'm pretty non-committal on that.
Okay.
I'm not ready to make a definitive statement either way on that one because I just haven't done the work.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going off script.
I know.
There.
Do you have an opinion on that?
I'm inclined to see one of them as a member of the Trinity.
Okay.
And my reasoning is there's discussion of judgment and if there's X number of righteous people in the city, I will spare it. That seems to me to be more of a member of the Trinity conversation there. Yeah. So I'm inclined to go. I'm inclined to go that there's one there.
Yeah.
One thing that I haven't been able to answer though is that two of them go to Lot. One of what happens to the third?
Yeah.
That always perplexes me, and I never know why.
Yeah. Yeah, which that is one of those things that makes it. How hard do you push the parallels?
Oh yeah.
How much do you read into that? How much do you not? I don't know.
Anyway, sorry, I totally went off script.
No, you're fine. I want to get to two more texts.
Yeah.
Psalm 110, because this gets picked up in the New Testament repeatedly.
Yeah, we were just talking about this passage at church.
Psalm 110, verse 1, a psalm of David. The Lord, or Yahweh, says to my Lord, Adonai, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. So you have David referring to someone as Lord who is in some sort of close proximity to Yahweh. So that there's Yahweh and this other figure, this Lord, who is given essentially universal dominion over creation. So again, would you see that if you didn't have the New Testament looking back at it? I think you could at least see something curious there of, that's interesting.
It would raise a flag.
Yeah. I mean, this is a passage that Jesus himself goes to when he's arguing with the religious leaders and basically says, we all know this refers to Messiah, and yet Messiah is supposed to be David's son, and yet David is referring to this Messiah as his Lord. How can he be his Lord? And they're trying to blow up their categories of messiahship there. But one last passage I want to make sure we get to, Proverbs 8. And this is widely debated, even today. Was debated within the early church. This is the long section on God's wisdom. And, when you look at some of the language that describes what it says of God's wisdom, like verse 22, the Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water. And so it goes on. Let's see, I wanted to pick up. It goes on giving some of those different examples. Then he says, down in verse 29, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master workman, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world and delighting in the children of man. So,
either Solomon thinks very highly of himself.
Well, there's plenty of discussion. Is this just sort of a personification of God's attribute of wisdom? And again, by itself, you can see how that could be read that way. But, man, when you look at what the New Testament does with identifying Christ as the wisdom of God in the flesh, it sure is suggestive that there's something more there than just a sort of personification of one of God's attributes, that there's personhood in view there. So those are some of the texts in the Old Testament that I think are most essential in discussing the Trinity in the Old Testament. Again, I think a fair reading, apart from the New Testament, is simply to say these texts suggest the presence of some kind of plurality within the one God.
Yeah.
So that even if you didn't have the New Testament, you could at least get to that point to say, yes, there is one God for sure, but there's some plural dynamic within that oneness that we don't understand or don't know what to make of.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the New Testament comes on and flips on the floodlights, and you go, oh, right.
Yes. Yes.
So, to me, again, this is an example of why you have to read the Old Testament in light of the New. Have to. Not just can, not just should, have to. Now, you got to be careful about not overriding what the Old Testament text says on its own. But if you don't read the Old Testament in light of the New, then I think you are running against the grain of how God wants you to read the Bible.
Yeah.
So I think
how he talked himself about reading the Bible.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the Trinity in the Old Testament. Some of those passages we might be more confident than others about a reference there, but I think that's a good foundation to build on there.
Absolutely.
Next week we're doing church history, kind of, right? We're kind of just talking.
I think that's the plan.
Yeah.
I think we're also in chapel next week. Is that right?
On the Thursday.
So we'll mention that again.
Yeah.
On Tuesday.
Got a live episode coming up that we're recording. So, all right, you ready to move on?
Yep.
Let's do it.
All right. Today in sports history, January 17, 2023, 1971, Super Bowl V, or V if you're hip. Miami Orange Bowl, Miami, Florida. Baltimore Colts beat the Dallas Cowboys 16-13. MVP, Chuck Howley, Dallas linebacker.
Yep.
When was the last time a linebacker was the MVP of a Super Bowl?
Boy, I don't know.
Was Ray Lewis?
Was he? I don't know. I mean, it almost always goes to a quarterback.
Almost always. Or
like if a running back blows up and has like 200-plus yards or something.
There was a cornerback that had 2 or 3 interceptions for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2002 that got it.
Okay.
I can't remember who it was, though. 1982, Czech tennis star Ivan Lendl? Is that
Lendl.
an I?
That's an L.
Excuse me.
Ivan Lendl.
Ivan Lendl scores a 6-7, 2-6, 7-6, 6-2, 6-4 win over the American Vitas Gularius.
Vitas Gerulaitis.
Yeah, that's what I said. To claim his first of 5 ATP Masters Grand Prix titles at Madison Square Garden,
Yes.
New York City. They played tennis in Madison Square Garden.
Yes. I will fully acknowledge that I put that in there just to have you read those names.
Okay.
And it will be evident to our listeners who know a little bit about tennis that you do not.
No, you want to know what? There was in my childhood a brief period where I watched the British Open and the U.S. Open faithfully every year.
There's no
Wimbledon. Excuse me. My goodness.
I think we've just proved my
Yep.
point.
Yep. But ever since probably Pete Sampras has retired, I have not watched tennis.
Okay. All right.
All right. Well, now that I've just made a fool of myself, 1988 AFC Championship, Mile High Stadium, Denver. The Broncos beat the Browns 38-33, featuring the infamous fumble. Browns' Ernest Biner at the Denver 3-yard line with 1:12 remaining.
An iconic moment in NFL history there. Feel terrible for him. He was a good dude, and so
Was that the drive?
No, that was the year. That was a few years before that was the drive.
Okay,
maybe the year before.
Because I believe that was that against the Browns?
That was against the Browns. But that was in Cleveland.
That was in Cleveland. Okay. 97 NBA suspends Dennis Rodman indefinitely for kicking a cameraman.
You remember this?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, like kicked him in a very sensitive place.
Yes. I remember my mom vividly telling me how evil Dennis Rodman was. And it's just furthered her.
Was that before or after he put on the wedding dress?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm not sure I was aware of that until I was an adult.
Okay.
2012, LeBron James becomes the youngest player in NBA history to record 20,000 career points during the Miami Heat's 92-75 victory over Golden State. LeBron James, 28 years old, 17 days past Kobe Bryant, 29 years old, 122 days.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, who you got? Or what do you have, I guess? I mean, honestly, not necessarily who, but it could be what.
Probably, I'm trying to think of, probably the fumble.
Yeah.
Is probably the most iconic.
As painful as it is for our Cleveland fans listening, yes.
Yeah.
I think that's the way to go.
Well, and I was about to say, well, really that was the Ravens, but they left all the records and championships there in Cleveland.
No,
so it's stuck with.
If you talk to Browns fans, that's their team.
Mm-hmm.
The Ravens don't exist until like the Ravens actually once they moved, then all of that like they kept the history even though they put a new franchise in Cleveland. Like the history didn't travel with them.
Well, do you know in Baltimore they will not put up the word Colts on the scoreboard? It's always Indianapolis.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah, because they're still bitter over losing the Indianapolis Colts from Baltimore to.
And ironically, they just did what Indianapolis did to them by taking another
basically,
team.
Yeah.
So the fumble it is.
Although the team name the Ravens for Edgar Allan Poe, I really like.
Yeah, it's a good choice. One thing you liked?
Oh my goodness. I hadn't thought much about this. It was such a haberdash getting here this morning.
It was.
I I'm going to say subbing in Sunday school for Matt Harmon.
Yeah, I haven't even had a
week.
chance to ask you how it went.
Yeah, I told your class that you were out gallivanting around Columbus, Ohio with your college buddies.
Gallivanting?
Gallivanting.
You used that exact word, gallivanting?
I believe I did.
Okay.
So you're going to have some questions to answer
Okay.
come Sunday morning, if anybody remembers.
Okay.
But we had some tough passages. We had a couple of weird ones in there.
Yeah, you were in Luke 22.
Yeah. Sort of the end of the Last Supper discourse there,
Mm-hmm.
the last 3 pericopes.
Yeah. Pericopes.
Yeah, did I use that right?
Pericope.
Pericopes. I've always called them pericopes. It's pericope.
Pericope. Yep.
I'm a fool. Yeah. We've just displayed that again and again today.
No. If you type that into Microsoft Word, it'll usually autocorrect it to Periscope.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So it's not uncommon for me to read a paper, someone trying to use that word, and I this Periscope follows the initial introduction. Like, what Periscope? Wait, what? Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I've ever heard that word actually pronounced.
Pericope. There it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So my one thing is, as you mentioned, I was in Columbus. Kate and I met up with 2 couple friends of ours from our college days at OU, and we hung out in Columbus for this past weekend.
Nice.
Got there Friday night, stayed through Monday. We did a lot of catching up. We rented a fabulous Airbnb. You would have loved it.
Yeah?
It was terrific. Had a lot of good space. Played a lot of games, board games.
Any good board games?
So I had never played. You ever played this game called Secret Hitler?
No. Sounds dangerous.
Yeah. It's sort of in the vein of. Are you familiar with the game The Resistance?
Yes.
Okay, so basically, there are fascists that you have to root out of the government, and so. And also Hitler is one of them. And so it's a game where you don't know who the enemy is, and so there's a variety of ways to try to figure out who that person is.
Okay.
So also a game called Imagine If. Have you heard of this?
Yes, I have played
Okay,
that.
that was entertaining. So enjoyed that a lot. Watched some playoff football and connected with our campus director from Campus Crusade for Christ when we were there. Now lives in Columbus. And so went over there, hung out with him. And I will note on Sunday morning, I did do something that I think was not just for leisure purposes. We were at Grace Polaris Church, the mothership.
You saw
And so
him?
it was the first Sunday of Zach in Ohio officially candidating for the lead pastor role. So he preached his first candidating sermon, and then he'll do that one more week, and then that week after that, the congregation will have a vote, and Lord willing, they will affirm him as the new lead pastor of the mothership. So it was
Awesome.
fun to get to hear him preach, fun to be there to support him and be a part of that. So it wasn't all just gallivanting. There was some ministry purposes there. So, all right.
Sounds like a lovely weekend.
It was a fantastic weekend. So we have talked some NFL playoffs. We have talked the Trinity in the Old Testament. We have opened up an old wound for our Cleveland fans and poured salt in it by talking about the fumble.
Yeah.
We have talked about you filling in for me in Sunday school. We've talked about my weekend in Columbus. And so I think by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. And all that's left to say is, until next time, the Lord bless you all real good.
Later.